So as part of our journey together, Dootrix helped deliver and fine-tune the role of architecture owner at Heathrow. This was a role that was introduced to ensure suppliers worked effectively together and met consistent standards of quality, governance and compliance. Now, Andy, you worked with us to help introduce that role and very much oversaw and steered its rollout at Heathrow. So firstly, could you explain some of the problems that the architecture owner solves? Why are they important and what do they do?
So the architecture owner for us is really important because it bridges that gap between the software developers and governance. So we understand that there's a lot of solution architecture that needs to be done, classic solution architecture, and it needs to be done, which is really important to make sure that it aligns with our overall architectural direction as an organisation, how we want to see our technology estate grow. But the gap then, of course, is, well, how do we translate that to a developer community who may be less familiar with some of the corporate activities that need to take place? So the architecture owner sits right in the middle of the two teams. And what we expect from an architecture owner is the ability to assimilate the knowledge that's needed to work in an enterprise environment, the importance of solution architecture designs, cyber assurance assessments, data protection assessments, all of those things that are needed to operate in a large organisation, but someone that also has a real appreciation of the development activities, what's important to a developer, what's important to them, why we might have blockers, what pieces of information are missing. So they very much act as the glue. And they form a similar sort of role to a product owner, which balances what the business wants and how do you articulate it to the developer. So we typically find that the architecture owner role is probably the most important out of three key roles that get us working. Product owner, architecture owner, and delivery lead. And if you've got all of those three roles working together, then you're going to get a really strong architecture out at the end of the process.
Mm-hmm. And this is a role like many others that you fulfilled through your partners?
Yes.
So what did you feel were some of the advantages of doing it like that?
They are very, very hard roles to find. But what we found was they were more easily found from people that had a development background, but could come across and we could help shape their understanding in terms of how an enterprise works. So we use the partner networks to bring architecture owners in because we're not a development house and we don't have our own internal development capability. But it's easier to become an architecture owner if you're a developer first and you've got the interest in understanding how an enterprise runs rather than understanding how an enterprise runs and having to take a bigger journey on really understanding how the development community operates.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about selecting the partner for developing that AO role?
So for us, we were looking for really personable people. So we were looking from people in the development community who could build really, really quick, strong relationships within the team that we had. And Dootrix provided our first architecture owner roles. And we found that what Dootrix had in abundance was the ability to provide us people with deep technical knowledge, with really strong cloud knowledge, but had all of the right skills to be really quickly integrated into a team, and also that had the aptitude to be able to really quickly pick up the rhythms and routines of an enterprise organisation.
So Heathrow works with a number of SIs, many of them global.
Yes.
We're definitely at the smaller end of that spectrum.
Absolutely.
Why did you choose to engage and develop a partnership with us?
Because you're our innovators. We wanted a partner that could really be working at the very cutting edge of what our cloud partners were delivering. So we wanted a partner that should the announcement have come out on a Monday, we would already be having a conversation on the Wednesday or the Thursday about how that technology could drive our business. And so that really cutting edge, really at the forefront of how the technology changing pieces was super important to us.
Awesome. And going back to the AO role specifically, yes. Talk us through the original brief for that. How did it take shape in practice?
In practice, we were exploring how we wanted to do agile delivery. There are a number of models out there. The architecture owner role is part of disciplined agile. It's it's a known role within a framework. We took disciplined agile as a framework rather than as a set of rules, and we worked through those roles that sat within disciplined agile. We went through quite a long process of defining our own agile processes, and that naturally came to the top of the list of the roles that we absolutely needed in order to be able to work with organisations that operate agile against the backdrop of us predominantly being a waterfall delivery organisation.
Mm-hmm. And were there any challenges with having AOs that were outside of the organisation? Did it ever cause conflicts of interests, or did everyone play nice?
So we never had an AO from one organisation working on a project for the same organisation. So we took architectural owners from a number of organisations, and we always made sure that the architecture owner that was working on a project wasn't working on a project that was directly back into their parent organisation. And that gave us a really interesting additional benefit that we hadn't anticipated, because we started to work out that the architecture owners were getting a really strong knowledge of how other partners were working. They were taking best practice from those partners, but they were also helping establish the wider partner ecosystem, because we now have architects in multiple organisations with really strong relationships because they've been through the process of delivering software, the good points, the bad points. So it really, the side benefit was it really drove the partner ecosystem itself. It was the architects that fundamentally brought the ecosystem together, and we weren't expecting that, but it was a very pleasant benefit of the way that we were operating.
And what difference has that AO role made to Heathrow? What more specifically were the wins that, I guess, that your AOs achieved?
Significant reduction in cost, because we have architects that have a really good understanding about how to implement the technology in the way that the cloud providers want the technology to be implemented. So we saw a number of instances prior to the architecture owner role where the solution architecture wasn't cost effective. So that was probably the biggest piece. And there was an order of magnitude change in the cost of delivering cloud software at Heathrow by having the architecture owner role in.
Wow, I didn't realise that.
No. We didn't realise it until we started doing it, and then we saw the costs significantly come down. If it's implemented properly, and if it's implemented with thought and with experience, then cost is one of the biggest benefits.
So what were some of the mistakes or the ways things were being done differently that caused those sort of higher costs then?
Not mistakes, but we were all on a cloud journey together. Our background together as two organisations has been moving from technology to net technology as they come on. A lot of technologies that when they arrive, they're not given to organisations to develop with strict guardrails around how costs could be managed. It's something that an organisation has to find itself. So I don't think there was anything untoward in terms of how we did software development, but what we found out is that if an architecture owner had a deep subject matter expertise in the technology it was delivering, then that was better than working with someone who had a general knowledge about it, but not specific knowledge on the topic that they were talking about at the time.
Okay, interesting. And Dootrix were you came on board to kind of help you fulfil that role, and I think we were some of the first architecture owners that you started working with.
The first, yeah.
The first.
Yep.
So how do you feel that we contributed to that?
The really important thing about Dootrix was the people. And we had a good conversation about who was going to be our first architecture owner, and we talked about a number of people within your organisation. But what the common theme with all of those people that we talked about was their people skills, their EQ, their ability to operate in a multi-vendor environment, to just be fundamentally easy to get along with. The ego was left at the door. There was no challenges in that respect. And sometimes when working with a broader sort of partner network, there's a desire to do better than maybe another partner. Where I really value relationships is where that doesn't exist, where everybody knows that they're pulling towards a common goal. And we found that the developers that were being turned into architecture owners as we went through this joint exercise together just didn't have that. They were just here to be better, to deliver better for the clients, to deliver better for Dootrix.
Yeah, and I do think that's something that you've managed to do really well in terms of bringing those partners together to work towards a common goal and to work well within that Heathrow environment. Like you said, there are no egos here, and everyone is working towards the same ends. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, let's leave the egos in Silicon Valley and we can crack on with deliver value for our organisation.
Again, if you were going through that journey again, and you were bringing those AOs in maybe for the first time again, is there anything you'd do differently this time around?
The world's changed, and the volume of additional work that needs to be put around delivering any software projects now, and I think we've talked previously about even the cost of building a mobile app now is more expensive. I think we would have to take a stronger focus on some of the more broader governance activities, particularly, for instance, cyber. I think it's pretty well known that cyber is becoming a bigger and bigger threat in the world. So I think it's a case of we'd probably have to lean more into some of the more traditional skills, and for those architecture holders to take on a slightly broader role. But that's not something that worries me particularly, because I think it's about getting the right people, and if you've got the right people in place, if they can understand the governance that we were looking to do back in 2018, 2019, then they'll understand the governance that's needed now. It's just maybe that there's more of it. So you're probably looking at taking on someone that would be more prepared to spend more of their working day doing those types of activities.
Yeah, and do you think that would still be covered under the same role, or is it multiple roles?
Hopefully it's the same role. I think, again, the bit that probably differentiates it is cyber, because it's such a specific skill. And then the other thing, of course, that's very, very quickly coming up in conversation is data, and whether... So the question I'm asking myself at the moment is, will a single person be able to cover the additional cyber and data aspects that typically are bigger in the projects that we're delivering at the moment?
Yeah, sure, yeah, okay. And what advice would you give to other organisations who are contemplating whether they need an AO? How would you suggest they approach the process of selecting and working with one?
So I think you need to really understand the mandatory processes that you've got to go through as an organisation to get from A to B, in terms of what your operating model is. I think you need to look at what skills you do not have, and more importantly, can you go and get those skills from the outside market? Because particularly with software development, the chances of you being able to attract the talent in-house are going to be harder than organisations like Dootrix. And then once you've understood who you are as an organisation, the skills that you're unlikely to be able to bring into your organisation, the next thing is, well, what is the cultural gap between the two organisations? And then really focus on that cultural gap, understand how you're going to build that partnership, understand where you think are going to go well, where they're not going to go so well, engage, and then learn as quickly as possible. Fail as fast as you possibly can. Something's not going right, super candid conversation, nice and open, get the challenges out of the air, see them as learning opportunities, and then get on and continue to drive value for the two organisations.
So that early feedback loop is really
absolutely,
important.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes the mistake twice and you've made a decision. So just keep, quick early feedback, making sure you're pivoting. Don't let it just carrying on running, because that's where the pain, in my experience, the client supplier relationships come from.
Yeah, obvious but great advice at the same time.
Yes, it's easier said than done, of course.
Cool. Thank you.